Welcome to the Meant to Be Outdoors podcast, where our goal is to connect listeners to the great outdoors with hosts Brian Hoffmeyer and Ben Brandell.
I'm host Ben Brandell, owner of Meant to Be Outdoors, instructor of outdoor skills, and passionate about personal growth.
I'm host Brian Hoffmeyer, wildlife biologist and avid outdoorsman. Welcome back to the Meant to Be Outdoors podcast. I'm your host, Brian. I have my co-host, Ben, here with me. And today, we are going to be addressing a Myth Monday that came in by request. This was actually requested to settle a family debate. So we're not going to name names, but family, consider the debate settled. So
Well, how long has this debate been going?
I didn't get clarity on that, but we are going to be the debate settlers today.
Great.
So we're going to be talking about ravens and crows today and really addressing, is there a difference? I know there are some people out there that believe that a raven and a crow are the same thing. And then there's some out there that are like, no way, they're totally different. And then, we'll talk a little bit about where they live, if you might see them, and really share some cool, interesting facts about those animals.
Well, it sounds like then you've already debunked it because you're telling us that there are some differences.
I didn't say that, but yes, if you want to assume that, there are definitely some differences between the crow and the raven. They are not the same animal, just to be clear. And we'll definitely dive into fully explaining that. But before we start, I want to say thank you for, there's some people that really have stepped up in the process of Ben and I learning to be podcasters from, you may not know this, but we do everything ourselves, from the recording to the editing to the launching the episodes that you guys hear on all the platforms, our podcast website. It's all us. And to disclaimer that, when we started, we had never done it before. We had no idea what we were doing. God put it on our hearts, so we ordered microphones. We got started. But God also sent people our way that did know what they were doing. And you know who you are, and we just want to say thank you. We're amazed at your breadth of knowledge in these areas and your willingness to answer the phone, to call us back, to help us when we're in need. So we're so thankful for that, to be able to do what we're doing.
Just so grateful and thankful, and we still don't have it figured out.
No, we're so. I mean, life is constantly learning, but with what we're doing, we learn every week.
Right.
Every week.
Yeah. I think if I could give a tip to anyone out there, but no matter what it is that you're doing, get a notebook, take notes, and truly listen. Listen before you think, process, and think you have it figured out. Just listen to those people first.
Yeah, and reflection, I think, is really important, to look back at where you started and where you are now and what you have learned, to really have an understanding of what you've learned. But also, Ben, and I really appreciate this about you, but never just being okay with okay. So if you feel off, if something isn't quite right, and it may be hard, it may take more time that you may think you don't have to really do something correctly, take that extra time. Do the small things, the details, to do the best that you can at whatever you are doing. So,
well, thank you for that, and I also want to thank you, Brian. You and I spend a lot of time together.
Yeah, we do.
I mean, in this relationship, this business, we test each other. Not only our sanity, but our skills. And so just thank you for that. It's been awesome so far. So thank you, Brian. Couldn't do it without you.
With that, let's jump into our topic. Ravens versus crows. We've already said they are not the same. They are two very distinctly different animals, and they're both, in my opinion, amazing animals.
Cool. Mm-hmm.
I've never worked with a raven, but I have worked a little bit with a crow. They're amazing if you just watch them in the wild, and the things that they do, and the way they act, the way they get their food, the way they interact with each other, other animals. They're amazing animals, and we hope to really bring light to that. I'm sure most people have heard that they are smart, but we're going to try to tell you just really how smart that they are. So let's jump in with talking about how they're different. We said they're different. We're going to tell you how they are. And the first and easiest thing to address is their size. Ravens are much larger than crows. A raven is going to be about the size of a red-tailed hawk. And red-tailed hawks have that 4 to 5 foot wingspan. They stand about 2 foot tall, and that's the same size as a raven. They're gonna be bigger birds, whereas crows are a little bit smaller, about a 2.5-foot wingspan, and only gonna stand about 17 inches tall at their largest. So you're comparing size here. You're looking at a 4-foot wingspan compared to 2.5. Staying with the appearance theme here, let's talk about their tail. So if they're out flying, they're gonna have their tails out. That's part of their flight mechanism. A raven's tail is going to be wedged shaped. So the primary feathers, those center couple feathers in their tail, are longer than the rest of their tail feathers. So it kind of makes this triangular wedge shaped tail. Whereas a crow, the feathers are all the same length. So when it's fanned out and they're flying, it's kind of a nice, smooth fan shape. Kind of like if you were to take playing cards in your hand and fan them all out. That's going to be more the crow's tail shape. So that's an easy way to identify them if they're flying, because it is hard to tell a bird's size when it's in flight.
Yeah, it is, because of how far away are they from me.
Yeah.
Also talking about flying, your ravens, they're going to be using thermals. So you have the heat up in the air, and they're going to use those to soar. Turkey vultures also do that. So as you're looking up, you're going to see this circling pattern. Ravens are going to do more of that, whereas crows, they're going to fly. They're going to fly from tree to tree, object to object. They're moving and landing. So flapping, flying. It's a crow. A raven has to fly until it gets up to that height where it's going to soar, but you're going to see them soaring more.
Right. The big difference there is that flapping of the wings versus the straight out steady wings using the heat, the thermal energy from the earth, raising it up for the ravens. The next thing is that the way they walk on land is even different, which is kind of an interesting thing to compare birds, because you think about birds and their flight, but ravens like to hop. They may walk a little bit, but they kind of have this goofy little hop with both feet that they do, whereas crows, they're just going to do their normal walk and waddle like a chicken around on the ground. That's kind of funny. If you want to see that, look up a raven hopping on the ground, and it's really kind of funny how they kind of lead with one foot and just hop and hop and hop, and it's kind of goofy looking.
Yeah, it is. And I have seen crows. They do hop, but when you watch with the raven, you can just see there's a difference in that.
There's
so
definitely
I've actually seen a crow pull trash out of the trash can, and as it's trying to carry it, it's kind of doing this goofy hop. So
yeah, it's almost like jump, because it's pulling something heavier than it
exactly.
Is. Yeah. Also with with ravens and crows, one is definitely going to be more common than the other, and you can probably take a guess as to what that is, and that's the crow. The crow has a huge range, and the raven has a big range, but not even half of what the crow's is. And so there is a lot more crows in North America, actually across the world, than there are ravens.
So ravens, you're going to basically find them, as you're saying, they're less common. You're going to mainly find them in Canada, Colorado, state of Colorado, and then headed west.
Yeah, there's kind of a line there. Once you get, we'll say, the eastern side of Colorado, all the way to the west coast, and then north up into not all of Canada, but we'll say 90% of Canada is where you're going to find your ravens.
So if I live in southern Texas, southern Arizona, am I going to be seeing crows?
Actually, no.
Okay.
So I say they cover most of North America, but not all of it. So those very southern parts of those southwest states of the United States, you're not going to have a lot of crows at all. And then seasonally, they do move a little bit. So they are going to be in Canada, but that's usually only during their breeding season. Their main breeding ground for crows is Canada.
So you're kind of getting into that migratory. So ravens, they don't migrate. They're going to hang in those regions that you're talking about, whereas crows do migrate, and that's where you can begin to see them in different states.
Crows are funny because with ravens, they very clearly are non-migratory. Crows, it's almost kind of like geese. You have geese that are resident and they never leave, and then you have some that make this big several thousand-mile migration to go breed. And crows are kind of the same way. But when they do leave to go breed, they're going to go to Canada, so they're considered semi-migratory.
There are people that eat crow.
Right.
And I know there's a saying about go eat crow, but people really do eat crow.
Have you ever eaten crow?
I have tried it, yes.
I have tried it too. It is not as bad as you would think it is, but it's not something that I would seek out as a meal.
Right. When you can enjoy deer, why waste your time with crow?
when I can go to the market and buy chicken and I'm not gonna choose a crow over that. But it is a food source for sure. And there are a lot of crow hunting seasons. Depending on where you live, you need to follow those if you're going to hunt for them. But there are crow hunting seasons. They can be tough to hunt because of their intelligence.
Right.
Another appearance thing that can help you tell the difference between a raven and a crow is the beak. Crows have a smaller beak, and ravens have this bigger, kind of more rounded, more curved beak. It almost looks like it has kind of a hump on top right there where it meets their head, meets their skull. But it's definitely a bigger, thicker, more curvature to it than your crow. You can really tell the difference when you see them side by side. When
you and I were looking at pictures, the raven beak actually reminded me of what we identify as a witch nose.
Yeah, okay.
It's got that crick in it like that, and it's kind of bent down.
Yeah,
so that helps.
That's a good comparison. The other thing is that ravens, they don't like to be in big groups. So if you see a big group of black birds that you think, well, that's either a crow or a raven, if it's a big group of them, it's probably crows, because ravens really only like to be in pairs. That's the biggest thing that they like. They don't like, they're not as social, I guess is probably a good word. They're not as social as the crows are. So crows love big family-style groups. Something interesting about a crow, when we think of birds in big groups, we usually think of the word flock. But a huge group of crows is not called a flock. It's actually called a murder. So when you see a whole bunch of crows together, that's called a murder. These murders can have as many as 2 million crows in it. So that's normally during when they migrate up to Canada for breeding season, but there'll be 2 million crows together. But, all the way down to 5, 10, 15 is kind of your normal thing that you see around. But can you imagine? I've never seen 2 million crows at once, but can you imagine what that would look like, seeing 2 million crows in one spot?
I'd really like to see that.
I think it would be an amazing sight. Might be a little noisy.
That is what I was going to add. If you've ever been around crows, just being outdoors, maybe turkey hunting, when one spots you or sees you,
they're vocal.
They are vocal, and it is loud. So 2 million to hear that, could be deafening.
Was out hunting one time, and I was actually filming. I was filming somebody else hunt, and it was really early in the morning, and a barred owl had kind of pitched out over this meadow and landed on the tree on the opposite point from where we were hunting. And it was just like this most peaceful moment, and I was filming this owl, and next thing you know, and I wasn't one, it wasn't two, it was probably 20 of them, and they were just bombarding this barred owl, which, come to find out, they hate owls, and I couldn't believe the noise. So it was like, it went from this tranquil peace of the sun rising and this owl to just nonsense because of these crows in a matter of minutes. I vividly remember that hunting memory.
That's good. You just mimicked a crow. It was pretty good.
It was C+.
Yeah, if we were outside and with a group, you can really let it call, let it out.
I didn't want my microphone to explode right here on my table.
But you and I, we know the area that we live, we're seeing crow. We're not seeing raven. But let's get into that, the sound of a crow versus the sound of a raven.
Yeah, I think the best way for that is just to play it for everybody so they can hear. So I want to describe it with words first, and then we'll let everybody hear it, so you can kind of hear the differences yourself. But first of all, the raven is I think croak is a good word, kind of a growl. They can get pretty loud and noisy too, but it's definitely more of a croak. So here is your common raven. And here is the American crow. So you can kind of hear there the differences. And that crow I would really describe as just a caw. And you can hear at the end there how they all join in together. And they can really almost be a noise nuisance when they get wound up about something.
Yeah, and actually where you can see the difference between pairs and groups. So that raven was kind of isolated. It actually sounded really far out. Maybe a crow way back there on the raven. audio, but the crows, yeah, when they get together as a group, they get loud.
They definitely do. I really want to kind of highlight. I know we already kind of did the geographical areas, but where we are here in southern Missouri, we only have crows. And so if you're in the eastern half of the United States, the Midwest, you're not going to see ravens at all. So if you're seeing a blackbird, it's going to be a crow. However, I do want to say that there is another species of crow that we have. We don't just have the American crow. And in this whole episode, when we're referring to ravens and crows, we're really talking about the common raven, because there is another species, and the American crow, because those are your two dominant ones. The other two species are not very predominant at all. But the fish crow is the other one that we have, and it has even a smaller home range. It's found in very specific areas. It's even more difficult to tell apart from the American crow than from the raven. Really, the best way I've found is when they do get vocal. The sound is pretty different, but other than that, they look very, very, very much the same.
They do. We are calling the fish crow. That's its name. I know you and we've kind of gotten the habit of calling it a river crow.
Yeah.
And I think why I started calling it the river crow is I see them a lot by the water.
Yeah, they're always around water.
Hence fish crow.
Right.
But, in size, they do seem like maybe a little bit smaller. Just a little bit. But their talk sounds really different. I mean,
we call it weird, but that's only because we're comparing it to the American crow that we always hear. So we heard the caw of the American crow earlier, so here is the sound of a fish crow. So you can tell much different, more nasally, almost like they have hands and they're reaching up and holding their nose when they're trying to do their call or something. But that's the easiest way that we have found to distinguish the two crow species. So we kind of hinted at how amazing these animals are at the beginning of the episode. Let's highlight some things and try to paint that picture of just truly how incredible these pieces of creation are.
With ravens, we can go back to the Bible and find Bible talking about ravens all over it. Genesis 8:7, really the first time that we see or hear about the raven is when Noah actually sends out the raven from the ark. And why he's using that raven is to find somewhere to land. It could be the tops of trees, even possibly dry ground. But that raven's going to continue to go back and forth until he doesn't show back up again.
Right. Basically, which it's super awesome to think the first animal that ever left the ark was a raven.
That is, yeah.
But Noah knew what he was doing, whether it was God's instruction or
just knowledge of
these animals. He did just spend a lot of time on a boat in close relation with them. So he sent this out knowing that if it didn't return, it found a place to land and it was finding food. And what that probably told Noah was, they eat carrion, which is dead animals. There were still dead animals around from the flood, but the floods were receding enough that there was a place for this raven to land. And the raven never returned. It never did return. So Noah knew the water was going down. There was place to land, but there were still dead animals from the flood for this raven to eat.
Yes.
Ravens and crows both are considered ground foragers, meaning they like to go on the ground to find their food. They're both omnivores. They're going to eat really anything. I mean, if they can catch a lizard, they'll eat the lizard. If they find a dead animal, they're going to eat the dead animal. Ben mentioned trash. I've been to places where these animals are so habitualized to humans in urban environments, they're literally coming down and stealing food off people's plates as they're eating on a patio at a restaurant. So they know how to get food, and they're going to eat anything.
Yeah, and getting into the crows, even they are so smart. It's crazy that you can even train them to use tools. They can mimic other sounds, other birds.
Yeah, a raven actually can mimic every other bird sound.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, that is awesome. With the crow, I think one of my favorite actually videos that you can watch, there's a lot of studies being done on crows, again, of how they use tools. But the one that's my favorite is a gentleman actually wears a mask, and he catches them by using a net, actually bans them.
A caveman mask, if I'm not mistaken.
It kind of looks like that. Yeah, it's a bald-headed, it's a human creature, but yeah, we'll go caveman for sure. But he's wearing it while he's not causing harm to these birds, but they're mad at him, right? And so they can actually identify faces. They've learned through that. When he can walk through the college, down the sidewalk, and all of these crows can see him, and they do nothing. But the moment that he puts the mask on, they go berserk.
They
remembered that face. And so there's a lot of studies that have been done after that, but they can recognize human faces, which is crazy to me.
Yeah, and there's research around what they call crow funerals or crow wakes. And what that means is that when they've found that when they present a dead crow, they actually used a taxidermy crow. When they present it, even when it's in human hands, that these crows get super vocal. They call in a bunch of other crows, and they all congregate and kind of make this chaos. And what they are speculating that they're doing is not really celebrating somebody's life like humans do, but rather teaching all the family members of crows of potential dangers that human or wherever that crow is deceased at, that's probably not a spot, or those things that are in that spot are not things that they should associate safety with.
And they also added that happens up to 5 years. So let's say that one crow sees that happen. That crow goes, grabs their group, comes back. They all start going crazy. But they say that they share that with their offspring as well.
Wow. Wow. That's crazy that they have that much memory to go back 5 years, because I have a hard time remembering what I ate for supper yesterday, and I'm a human.
Yeah, or my kids' lunch for school. Oof, yeah.
Both. One of the coolest things about both of these species, Ben, you and I, when we worked in outdoor education, and I was an animal trainer, and we actually took animals out that had been injured and couldn't go back to the wild. We took them out to schools and places to teach. We wanted a crow so bad. We had a request list every year of animals that we may try to obtain, and crow was always on it. It was at the top of our list because we wanted to train it to talk.
Yeah. And
both ravens and crows are great at learning to talk. They can say even multi-syllable words. And that's kind of a really cool thing, that they have this brain that can pick up on words that we're saying. And I wouldn't necessarily call it communication, but they can, without lips, they can say human words. That's pretty amazing, their vocal capabilities. We never got the crow, by the way.
Oh, I do remember that. We were all kind of defeated because we were really excited.
We really did. We did get a crow.
But it didn't turn out.
It did. It had been, and maybe this is a testament to their memory, but because of the trauma, it was a rescue animal. Because of the trauma it had went through, it never really was able to get a great relationship with any humans. And maybe that's kind of a sign to the limit of their intelligence. There was no forgiveness there. Humans can go through trauma and bad things and cope and deal with it, and we have a soul and a savior, so there's forgiveness there. A crow didn't. There was no forgiveness. It knew it had been through trauma and had been caused harm, and it was never going to forget that.
And not to get too deep, but there's no relationship in that.
Right.
I mean, there's just no relationship there. Looking at Noah, this raven got to go to and from, and once he could leave, he's gone.
Right.
Didn't come back.
Yeah. There was not really any connection, I guess you would say.
Right.
With ravens, there's some interesting studies that they have found that ravens learn human hunting seasons. So as hunting seasons come into play, we'll say deer season around here, even though we don't have ravens, let's say deer season out west, just to be more specific. As they start to hear gunshots, they will go to those gunshots in pairs, because they know the hunter's going to harvest the animal and he's going to leave behind carcass or guts. They know that gunshot means easy food, carrion, things to eat.
And this is just a theory that I am saying right now, but deer, they could be wise enough to even begin to understand that, I'm hearing this raven go crazy. I may need to stay away.
Don't know.
But animals do pick up on other animals' nervousness, aggressiveness, whatever that is. And so
they're reading the signs for sure. This is also, there's been a little bit of research around this, but it's never been like just really put down as a fact. But we've talked about deer love corn. In our food plots episode, we talked about if you put corn out, deer are going to come to it. But there's always this, well, how the heck do they find it? If you pour corn out, and they find it almost like this miraculous speed within hours sometimes. How do they know it's there? And what people are starting to think or understand is that they hear the songbirds or the chatter of squirrels, these animals that are able to fly over and be above and see it first. They recognize the feeding sounds of songbirds and go to that knowing that it might be a food source for them, which I think is just amazing because from our outside view looking in, we don't pick up on those things because that's not really our world.
That's good. You know, to kind of wrap up on my side of like on that hunting piece, when I wear orange, animals react differently than when I'm fully camouflaged, you know, and to know that a crow can identify my face. So if I did something negatively to it, it can identify my face. It just shows just honestly the power of creation. Like each animal is so unique, but so awesome in their own right.
It is. And I hope everybody gets the understanding, one, of the differences of crows and ravens. Most of all, if you just take away from this that they are different, what I'd really like to compare is that they are in the same genus. They're very, very closely related. They're both corvus, but they are different species. And to help you understand that, I would compare that to deer. That would be like a whitetail being a crow and a mule deer being a raven. So they're very, very closely related, but different species. So hopefully that kind of gives you an understanding.
So then, who won the debate?
In the family?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what sides were, but hopefully we settled that family debate.
Good. Hopefully
you guys learn and understand that there's many, many more crows. There's 27 million crows in North America. Hopefully you understand the home ranges, and you have an appreciation for how amazing these animals are. That is going to be it for this episode of this Myth Monday podcast. Please, if you want to support the podcast, follow us on Patreon. You can become a member there. Any link tree on our social media accounts will take you to that. Follow us on social so you can see all the posts we do leading up and follow along as we do some of our programming throughout the year. We're super excited about school being back in session and getting back with some of the students. Also, we would love for you to leave us a review and hit the automatic download and follow button on whatever platform you listen. But that is it for this episode of Meant to Be Outdoors podcast. Between now and the next episode, we hope you find time to get outdoors. Thank you for listening to the Meant to Be Outdoors podcast, hosted by Brian Hoffmeyer and Ben Brandell. Please help us by subscribing. Also, follow along on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook.